entire job is to try and make sure that people that have operate on farmland continue to being able to operate on farmland over the long term. So looking at trying to not build too many houses, trying to keep soil on agricultural land, trying to make sure agricultural land isn't paved, and generally trying to make sure that there isn't too many people building new homes around the outside of it and creating conflicts.
So part of my job is to work with the Strengthening Farming Program, which is a program that happens in the background, and it really what it does is it secures the land base for farmers so they can farm.
The ALC was created by the provincial government back in the 70s to preserve and protect land, which is very scarce in BC because of our mountainous topography, and to make sure that it was here for future generations to produce food.
I spend my entire career trying to figure out what can be permitted and stuff like that, and there's just a lot of information, sort of communication about what you can do and what your options are. I think is super useful to make sure that we're preserving farmland and folks are aware and they don't get too far down their projects without understanding sort of what needs to be done in the way of applications prior to them starting.
And farming is changing, so sometimes what farming looks like on the land base changes, and it's up to the Commission to stay abreast of that and respond to government, who often takes a look at the policy framework and changes it.
When you're having a conversation about protecting land and food production and agriculture, that also translate into other areas of urban planning, economic development, housing, which I've spoken to a little bit more. So those areas are still very much tied to agricultural production and land use planning.
So my job, I don't deal with the individual land use applications. I'm more of a generalist, so I'm a little bit higher level. So I work to make sure we have consistent interpretation or we have consistent usage of our policies. So when we have 15 different land use planners working in different regions, I'm kind of the person who they come to make sure that they're reading the language the same way as the people on the island or in the north or in the south coast.
Geographic Information Systems. So it is a system basically that works with data that has a spatial component. So we're just sort of working with that data to visualize patterns and relationships on the land. It's because we help provide a lot of information to the staff and commissioners for their day-to-day work. So helping them visualize what's going on is a big part of what we do. So for example, like with the regional planners who quite often work on the OCP mapping. So we will overlay like zoning information, for example, with the ALR boundaries to help them understand what's going on maybe in a community and that kind of thing.
So I grew up in central British Columbia, kind of on a hobby farm, and I was in 4-H for a number of years. Everything that I learned in 4-H I use today in my job. Most specifically, writing and giving speeches, as well as demonstrations. I use, if not daily, weekly, or monthly at conferences or small-scale meetings. And even just the consistency, or having to stick with something, having the commitment, taking notes at meetings, having to relate those things back, at year end, kind of when you're doing your record books. All of that I learned in 4-H and I use today in my job.
The skills that we're working more and more with are, relationship building capacity, people's ability to design documents, or an interest in art, or somebody's ability to just critically analyze a document, looking at something or a map and comparing that to a policy document where you're looking at, can you do this here, or what are the outcomes if you don't allow a certain type of agriculture? So somebody that has those types of skills would be a real asset in our ministry.
What I find is in this job, there's so much variety. It's like the weather in Ireland. If you don't like it, just wait a minute. And something's going to come up. It's like having your hand in a candy jar every single day. There's something that comes up that's just so interesting. And you want to think about it and you want to deal with it. That's what pulls you forward, right? I want to think about this problem.
I believe in agriculture. I believe in its future. I'm fortunate that I have a job that's extremely varied. In a simple sense, you might say that I'm working in an industry that's related to agriculture, but the interface between agriculture and every other level of government and the land management landscape is vast.
To be honest, it's the relationships. I get to work with local governments all across BC. I get to travel a little bit around to get on a bit of agricultural land, which is a real thrill for me. So it is neat to see the different types of products that are produced across the province and to see the results of protecting that land over the long run.